recorded along with the slides and of course the audio as well. As you know, at the beginning of each of these, we do have an official statement. It is the abbreviated disclaimer, so hopefully it should go a little bit quicker. I am communicating today to you in my official capacity on behalf of FedRAMP at the General Services Administration. We hold these meetings to enhance transparency between industry and FedRAMP so that we can open a dialogue and share new developments. Nothing that we share constitutes as business advice, and any reference in this conversation to any specific commercial products or the use of any corporation name is for the information and convenience of the public. It does not constitute endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by GSA. That being said, let's kick off today's agenda. Really three major topics today. Just updates on some of the SCN betas that's going on. If you are tracking the timeline, we are closing out the closed beta and moving into the open beta portion. So we'll talk about some of the things that we're seeing on the closed beta side, as well as the process as we move forward to the open beta. The FedRAMP Authorization data sharing standard, which has gone out as well. We'll talk a little bit about that and the closed beta coming up for that. And lastly, the SC7 RFC that's currently open now. If you're not tracking, we'll talk a little bit about that and the subnetting white paper that we rescinded earlier last month, and just some of the way forward from there. All right, so the SCN closed beta updates. We've got 9 CSPs participating, both on the commercial and government side. I think last month we had 7 at that point in time. We're tracking 52 significant changes. The overwhelming majority of them are adaptive. We do have a few transformative changes, and the easiest way for kind of us to sit in the sideline and watch to figure out what's working and what's not working has really been to sit through the collaborative Kanban processes, where a lot of the CSPs have been going through their significant change notification processes, to sit on the periphery and to watch those go through, and then to kind of work through some of the issues that have been brought up throughout the process. I think last month we shared some of the preliminary findings as well, and I think it was 1 or 2 of these, but I'll go a little bit more in depth into the 4 that are in there now. The first thing we ran into is the process for marketplace updates, right? At what point in time in the significant change notification process do we allow marketplace updates? And I think some of the easiest answer is, right, if it's going to be a new service that is added or deleted, right, the moment we do the notification, we can put that up in the marketplace with an asterisk that says, hey, this is either undergoing evaluation for being added or being deleted as a service. The targeted turn on or turn off date is XX and X. That seemed to have worked out pretty well for the 1 or 2 that weren't, or that were a little bit elongated. The SCN categorization, we did have a lot of questions of whether it is adaptive or transformative, and we've at least working through this process has fallen back on really the SIA, right? The SIA really does a good job of laying it out against the requirements in the standard itself to identify if it is truly an adaptive change or a transformative change in nature. Lastly, or not lastly, I guess second to last, SCN changes do not, sorry, there's wording missing in here, do not trump or overshadow your specific agency requirements or your contractual requirements, right? If you have contractual requirements that are different than what are said in the SCN, right, you are clearly still going to be held to that contract. So please, if there are conflicts, work with your agency partner, the contracting offices, to fix those or to adjust those as you work through the process. We as FedRAMP cannot help you through the individual contracts with your own agencies. That's between agencies and CSPs. So if there are requirements levied that are harder on there, please work through that process. And lastly, a better understanding of when opt-in applies, right? I think, when we wrote the significant change notification standard, there's a lot of verbiage associated with the ability to opt in, right? And I think as we work through, and we'll update the technical assistants to talk through this a little bit more here as we get start going through the open beta. But just because an agency is able to opt out of the changes does not mean necessarily they are not impacted by the potential security impacts of those changes itself, if that makes sense. I think we owe kind of a better understanding in the technical assistance portion of what it truly means to be opt-in and opt-out when the security changes still do impact agencies. Open betas, as I said, I think I'll show the timelines here for the open betas on the next slide, or at least I hope I do. But the open beta requirements, right, are not very different than the closed beta requirements. One of the things we are going to change out is we took a very proactive approach in the closed betas, and we will still do that as we work through closed betas for some of the other standards. But as we move to the open betas and as we expect more participation to occur in those open betas, FedRAMP as a PMO are not going to sit in every collaborative Kanban meeting with every potential significant change during the open beta process. We are going to sit on a more reactive side, and as issues are identified, right, there's a place to go to let us know, and we can help you work through those individual issues. The overwhelming majority of changes that happened in the closed beta didn't have issues, and like I said, of the four major areas that we saw we needed to make updates or at least talk through, it didn't hinder a lot of the significant changes. So open beta requirements, clearly you have to have a significant change planned within that open beta window. I know that seems pretty obvious and straightforward, but we struggled with this through some of the volunteers on the closed beta side as well, us getting requests for volunteering, but the significant change wasn't for months from now, right? Have needed any third party required to support your SENs. In the last update to the significant change notification standard, the 3PAO requirement was lightened to really cover those aspects of the changes and the impact analysis that couldn't be done through automated checks and balances, right? Really those that required the more manual checks and balances. So if you do have a transformative change that does require that, before you volunteer for the open beta, please make sure that those either contracts or those people or whoever is supporting that is in place. And lastly, like I said, we are going to make a more reactive approach, but when you do volunteer and you do give us your timeline and your process and things like that, just the establishing a closeout meeting on the tail end with FedRAMP just to identify any issues or lessons learned that may not have been brought up throughout the process. And same as last time, email rev5@gsa.gov. It's almost the same exact information we asked for previously, and I do want to reiterate, please make sure you have agency buy-in. The first time the agency hears of this should not be Paul Augusta showing up to a random meeting, right? It just makes it awkward for everyone. So please make sure you talk to all your agencies. If your agencies are not as involved in collaborative Kanban as they should be, or you have onesies or twosies that are not involved, please make sure you notify them in writing. And if the rest of the agencies are on board for it and there's no pushback from it, we can work through that piece. Oh, so I talked through some of this already, getting ahead of myself. Like I said, the open beta will be run slightly different. You'll email us at the email that was previously posted. These slides and the video will be posted within the next 2 to 3 days. Slides will be posted on our FedRAMP GitHub. And the video will be posted on our YouTube page, so you'll be able to get all the information there if you didn't write it down. Yes, like I said, we'll be taking a more reactive approach to this just from a man/woman power perspective. It's going to take a lot more, and we'll also be running another set of closed betas while this open beta is running. And as you complete your changes, just please let us know, because we are tracking those in a spreadsheet of doom, and we do want to make sure that if it's closed, we're good and we don't have to track you down. Like I said, please make sure you do a closeout meeting, and we'll talk about that once we initiate receipt of your initial request. All right, FedRAMP authorization data sharing standard was released on the 24th. For those who remember the initial version, it was called S3AD. the standard for storing and sharing authorization data, I believe is what it was originally called. Really, the intent is twofold, right? We've talked about this for a while now. Long-term, FedRAMP will stop using Connect and stop managing all FedRAMP authorization data. I think we get something between 60 to 70 requests a day, and just with the current priorities and workload, it's just not feasible long term. But the key is not just transitioning away from a FedRAMP managed repository, but moving more towards a third party or CSP managed trust center. It builds upon the feedback, like I said, from the S3EAD or the S3AD pilot for storing and sharing authorization data. Remember, I don't know if we talked about this last month, but I know we talked about this the month before. When we talk about effective dates, there are really two categories of effective dates. Most of the standards that are coming into play will come in on day one for 20X, right? So the day they're posted and the day that they're put into place, they tend to be ready to rock for 20X. And for most of the standards for Rev5, they will be slowly implemented, right? So if you see like a Rev5 B1, B2, you'll notice that that's Rev5 Beta 1, Rev5 Beta 2. Once again, all of these will transition, all of that nomenclature will transition to our roadmap. I got a slide later that talks about, Pete's done a significant amount of work on updating the roadmap over the last week and a half. So there's a lot of new content, a lot of new updated content as well. But as you'll notice in the new standard, it leaves out a lot of the legacy requirements of mandating storage be kept at the level of FedRAMP authorized storage that the package is at. That's caused a lot of kind of heartache and heartburn in the past, and I think it was one of those legacy functions that wasn't necessarily brought on by policy, but was brought on by just kind of formal processes. And we're just kind of updating it to hit with today's standards, I guess. I think the last big piece is really our desire to get out of, or not get out of, but start getting away from promoting both, or just the human readable side, right? Just shoving a ton of Word documents, Excel documents in a file folder, but also moving more towards machine readable availability, right? In line with a lot of the processes and standards that are coming out with 20X, and those authorization pipelines. And last, FedRAMP PMO will review and approve final transition from USDA Connect to a trust center for all participants who meet the standard. So please, if you are working to migrate, please follow kind of the pilot timelines. Don't do your own thing and kind of shut out Connect without kind of working with us first. And lastly, if you want to see the authorization data sharing standard, it's available on our GitHub, just like all the other standards. You can see the previous one as well, the S3AD one. Our timelines for closed betas will run the end of September to November 31st. So if you are interested in doing that and you have the capability established already, or you're working towards having that capability established within the timeline associated with the closed beta, please reach out to us. It is the same email address, and it is the same 2 to 3 people checking that email address as the other betas. Thank you, Marcia. So if you are interested, please do email us. Like I said, the closed beta will be open up in December. The wide release will run in March timeframe tentatively. And yes, if you are interested in it, please email us. The same requirements for most of the betas. I'll reply, but please, make sure. The difference between this one is you describe the trust center, the authentication mechanisms or methods leveraged for that trust center. If there is an implementation timeline, like you don't have one that exists right now, and you need to work up to build out the requirements associated with the ADS standard, when do you think that implementation timeline is, right? If the implementation timeline is past the closed beta, it doesn't help us or you being part of the closed beta, right? If you want to hold off then and be part of the open beta, we can work through that later. And lastly, if your trust center is up and running and there are instructions for accessing it, please pass us those. And once again, same thing that I want to harp on from the last beta is, ensuring that your agencies are aware of this transition and they are okay with it, right? Please make sure you run it by them. Like I said, the first time of them hearing from these should not be from us. Yes, and lastly, I think if you're tracking the subnetting white paper, the beloved subnetting white paper was rescinded on 8 August. I know that after 3 days of mourning, we released on August 11th the updated RFC for SC7 boundary protection balance and improvement release. Please go out and read that. Right, it is a pretty big deviation, I think, from our traditional subnetting white paper where we read through SC7 Bravo very verbatim with the subnetting requirements. As we did some research, kind of when that wording came into play, I believe it was with 853 Rev3 in 2008-2009 timeline, which makes sense that it was used, that wording was used very very to the point, right? And I think, as we progress in cloud and a lot of the things that are available to us today that were not available to us in 2008, right? It just makes sense to provide a little bit more broad guidance, which still gets to the spirit and intent of the SC7 Bravo requirements. So if you do have comments, please do let us know. I think as of yesterday when I talked to Pete about it, there didn't seem to be much heartburn at all with this change or much feedback at all with this change. So if it is giving you a lot of heartburn or you do have better ideas, please, I'd love to hear it while that window still opens. And it will close September 11th. And that one will be applicable to both Rev5 and 20X upon completion, right? This is not anything that's going to be done in a beta fashion. Our Rev5 team that's reviewing packages will migrate to that immediately. Lastly, I talked about this a little bit. Not too many major updates in the public roadmap from the Rev5 side, but I did want to throw the snapshot of the Rev5 portion of the calendar on here so you can see what's up and coming. While I talk through just real quickly about, please visit our GitHub. Pete spent a lot of time updating our kind of long-term roadmap, and all of our teams are working diligently against that roadmap and providing updates pretty regularly, so that you at least know where we're going as a community. And we're trying to stay as open and as transparent as possible. That's all I got on public roadmap. And next but not least, our next meeting will be on 8 October. If you're interested in presenting, please let me know. Otherwise, I think we're good to go here. And Ryan, unless there's something I miss wholeheartedly there, I say we close this out.